Secure Synopsis, 23rd July 2021. The first topic here is about General Studies 1. The topic is about population and associated issues, poverty, developmental issues, urbanization, their problems, and their remedies. So, unplanned growth with no defense against weather systems or disasters is leaving Indian cities a lot poorer. Illustrate with examples. So, that is the kind of questions that has been asked on the first note today. Okay, so let us get started. Due to global warming, the volume and duration of monsoonal rain are becoming unpredictable, and its catastrophic impacts on cities will become more frequent. One can give the example of Mumbai city and the urban floods it is witnessing. The revival of the monsoon has affected Mumbai and its suburbs once again. It has disrupted drinking water supplies and had exposed the ill state of its infrastructure. The limitations of Mumbai's infrastructure has to be taken into consideration while answering this question. Let us have a look at the answer. The revival of the monsoon has overwhelmed Mumbai and its suburbs once again, paralyzing life, disrupting the drinking water facilities, and exposing the parlous state of its infrastructure. Overburdened drainage, unregulated infra construction, no regard to the natural topography and hydrogeomorphology all make urban floods a man-made disaster. As the incidence of climate variability and extreme weather events increases, urban flooding becomes more and more common. While the untimely heavy rains can be attributed to climate variability, the urban flooding is largely due to unplanned urbanization. Now let's move on to the next body of this answer. Causes for the increased inadequate drainage infrastructure. That's one of the most important thing. So, terrain alteration, lasting irreversible damage has been done to the city by property builders, property owners, and public agency by flattening terrain and altering natural drainage routes. Reducing seepage, Indian cities are becoming increasingly impervious to water, not just because of increasing built up, but also because of the nature of materials used. Hard, non porous construction material that makes the soil impervious lacks implementation. Even the provisions of rainwater harvesting, sustainable urban drainage systems, etc., in regulatory mechanisms like the environmental impact assessment, adoption at user end as well as enforcement agencies remains weak. Encroaching natural spaces, the number of wetlands has reduced to 123 in 2018 from 644 in 1956. Green cover is only 9%, which ideally should have been at least 33%. Now, what's the way forward? There is a need for holistic engagement. Urban floods of this scale cannot be contained by the municipal authorities alone. Floods cannot be managed without concerted and focused investment of energy and resources. The Metropolitan Development Authorities, National Disaster Management Authority, state revenue and irrigation departments, along with municipal corporations, should be allowed involved in such work together. Such investments can only be done in a mission mode organization with active participation of civil society organizations at the metropolitan scale. Developing sponge cities. The idea of a sponge city is to make cities more permeable so as to hold and use the water which falls upon it. Sponge cities absorb the rainwater which is then naturally filtered by the soil and allowed to reach urban aquifers. This allows for the extraction of water from the ground through urban or peri-urban wells. This water can be treated easily and used for city water supply. Wetland policy. There is a need to start paying attention to the management of wetlands by involving local communities. Without doubt, terrain alteration needs to be strictly regulated and a ban on any further alteration of terrain needs to be introduced. To improve the city's capacity to absorb water, new porous materials and technologies must be encouraged or mandated across scales. Examples of these technologies are bibswales, bioswales, and retention systems, permeable material for roads and pavement, drainage systems which allow storm water to trickle into the ground, green roofs, and harvesting systems in buildings. Drainage planning, watershed management, and emergency drainage plans should be clearly enunciated in policy and law. Urban watersheds are microecological drainage systems shaped by contours of terrain. Detailed documentation of these must be held by agencies which are not bound by municipal jurisdictions. Instead, there is a need to consider natural boundaries such as watersheds instead of governance boundaries like electoral wards for shaping or a drainage plan. Water sensitive urban design, these methods have taken into consideration, needs to be taken into consideration the topography, types of surfaces, natural drainage, and leave very less impact on the environment. Vulnerability analysis and risk assessment should form part and parcel of city master plans. In a changing climate, the drainage infrastructure, especially stormwater drainage, has to be built considering the new normals. Tools such as predictive precipitation modeling can help do that, and are also able to link it with adaptive capacity of urban land use. Conclusion: these can all be delivered effectively through an urban mission along the lines of Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation, National Heritage City Development and Augmentation Yojana, and Smartest Cities Mission. Flood management will not just help control recurring floods but also respond to other fault lines, provide for water security and more green spaces, and will make the city resilient and sustainable. General studies to distribution of key natural resources across the world, including South Asia and the Indian subcontinent. Getting all Indian tap water may be desirable, but what's really needed is safe drinking water in our country. Current scenario of safe drinking water in India: more than 163 million Indians, higher than population of Russia, do not have access to safe drinking water. Irrespective of the source of water, in most parts of rural India, availability of water decreases dramatically in the summer months as the water levels drop and surface sources may dry up. India's estimated per capita availability of water in 2025 will be 1,341 cubic meter. This may further fall to 1,140 cubic meter in 2050, bringing it closer to becoming water scarce. Niti Aayog's Composite Water Management Index 2018, India ranks 120 out of 122 countries. India is ranked 13th among the 17 most water-stressed countries of the world. According to the Ministry of Urban Development, 80% of India's water is polluted. Sustainable Development Goal Target 6.0 calls for universal and equitable access to a safe and affordable drinking water. The target is tracked with the indicator of safely managed drinking water services, drinking water from an improved water source that is located on premises, available when needed, and free from fecal and priority chemical contamination. For many years, the central and state governments have been making efforts to increase access to safe and adequate drinking waters. The provision of a basic drinking quantity of drinking water in rural India has been achieved through hand pumps, dug wells, household water supply, etc. Thus, while states like Sikkim managed to achieve high levels of HWS, relatively, that is household water supply, a relatively low percentage of rural Indian households have access to this. Factors affecting drinking water supply in India: climate change, increasing water scarcity, population growth, demographic changes, and urbanization already pose challenges for water supply systems. By 2025, half of the world's population will be living in water stressed areas. Reuse of wastewater to recover water, nutrients, or energy is becoming an important strategy. Increasingly, countries are using wastewater for irrigation. In developing countries, this represents 7% of irrigated land. While this practice, if done inappropriately, poses health risks, safe management of wastewater can yield multiple benefits, including increased food production. Options for water sources used for drinking water and irrigation will continue to evolve with an increasing reliance on groundwater and alternative sources, including wastewater. Climate change will lead to greater fluctuations in harvested rainwater. Management of all water resources will need to be improved to ensure provision and quality. No binding to the BIS standard in India. The solid waste which is dumped around, toxic industrial waste and sewage among other factors contribute to pollution of the groundwater. The dissolved solids cannot be removed by chlorination. The rural drinking water service delivery, there is inadequate attention given to taking measures to sustain the source of the water. In most cases, groundwater is a challenge. This proposed mission will make source sustainability measures mandatory prior to pumping and distributing water to households. Another issue with the traditional approach to service delivery was that the provision of drinking water was viewed primarily as an engineering solution, with schemes being planned and executed by the public health and engineering departments. However, water is an ideal sector for the applicability of the principle of subsidiarity, performing only those tasks which cannot be performed effectively at a more immediate or local level. Jal Jeevan Mission, a solution. With adequate capacity building and training, water can be most efficiently managed at the lowest appropriate level. Adopting this principle, the Jal Jeevan Mission's first preference will be to have a community managed single village groundwater based schemes wherever sufficient quantity and good quality of water exist. Wherever adequate quantity of safe groundwater is not present, or where it may be technically not feasible to have a single village schemes, surface water based multi village schemes will be promoted. Further, in some remote regions where it may not be economically feasible to have household water supply schemes, local innovations such as solar based schemes will be encouraged. It is not commonly known that um, uh, um, household water supply amounts to about 75% of the amount of water supplied. With the rural households to get HWS under the proposed mission, huge quantities of household wastewater will be generated across the country, therefore making its effective management critical. There is a plan to include a mandatory provision under the mission for the effective channeling and treatment of household wastewater through appropriate and low cost drainage and treatment systems. Once appropriately treated, this wastewater can be used for both recharge of groundwater as well as for irrigation purposes. What's the way forward? An extension, information, education, and communication will be needed to create a people's movement for water management. The ongoing Jal Shakti Abhiyan will help in creating awareness about the importance of integrating source sustainability and water reuse. This integrated approach to decentralized, community managed, and sustainable water management is the backbone of the government's plan to ensure that every household gets the benefits of water supply. Let's conclude this answer. The Jal Jeevan Mission will be a major step towards improving our people's ease of living and meeting their aspirations of a new India. Let's move on to the next topic. Structure, organization, and functioning of the executive and the judiciary, ministries and departments, of the government, pressure groups, and formal and informal associations and their role in the polity. Account for the role played by public prosecutors in ensuring a fair justice system in the country. A public prosecutor is considered as the agent of the state to represent the interest of common people in the criminal justice system. The prosecution of the accused is the duty of the state, but not individually the duty of the aggrieved party. They are appointed in almost all countries. In the case of Babu versus State of Kerala, the court observed that public prosecutors are ministers of justice who is duty bound to assist the judge in the administration of justice. The public prosecutor is defined in section 24 of the CRPC. They serve as the basic principle of rule of law. Example, all term partem, and no person shall be condemned unheard. The functions of the public prosecutor differ according to their designation. Public prosecutor supervise the function exercised by the additional public prosecutor in session court and high court. Chief prosecutor supervise the functions exercised by assistant public prosecutor in metropolitan magistrate court. Additional prosecutor conduct criminal proceedings in the session court. Assistant public prosecutor, they examine the charge sheet prepared by agencies and submit the acquittal or discharge. They also are responsible for the evaluation of evidence and refiling revisions petitions. They also conduct the criminal proceedings in the Court of Metropolitan Magistrate. Director of Prosecution, it is the head office. They exercise the overall control and supervision of officers of directorate. They also look after the account branches. Role of the public prosecutor. Role of public prosecutors, we have some points here. In the investigation process, to make an appearance in the court and obtain an arrest warrant, to obtain search warrants for conducting a search in specified premises, to obtain police custody remand for interrogation, including custodial interrogation of the accused, to initiate a proceeding for the declaration of the non-traceable offender as the proclaimed offender, to record the evidence of accused in the police report regarding the advisability of the prosecutions. At the time of trial, sentencing, when the accused is proven guilty, then the defense counsel and the public prosecutor further argue to decide the quantum of punishment. At this stage, the public prosecutor may argue for the adequate punishment, keeping in mind the facts, circumstances of case, and gravity of the offense. It helps the judge to arrive at a judicious decision. To conduct a speedy trial, right to a speedy trial is a fundamental right, and it is pleadly given in Article 21 of the Constitution of India, which states right to life and personal liberty. The prosecutors have a responsibility to call the witnesses whose evidence is essential to decide the case, to cross-examine the witness and to see that no witness is left unexamined, to produce all the necessary documents. Public prosecutors also have a role in narrative building. Since they represent the state's case in criminal trials, they build narratives of the criminality and criminalization. Daniel Richman describes them as adjudicative gatekeepers who play a key role in translating criminal law on the books to criminal law in action. Such narratives are especially pernicious in cases involving alleged terrorist activities and anti-nationals, where anxieties about the security of the state already haunt the imagination of those in the criminal justice system and ordinary citizens. Thus, public prosecutors who support criminal justice reform can be a powerful force for altering the culture of under-trial detention. Other important roles: the public prosecutor cannot aggravate the facts of the case or deny to examine the witness whose evidence may weaken the case. The main aim must be to discover the truth. He should not defend the accused. It is against the fair play of administration of justice or against the legal profession. He represents the state, not police. He is an officer of state and is appointed by state government. He is not a part of any investigating agencies but an independent authority. He is charged with statutory duties. Superintendent of police or district magistrate cannot compel to the public prosecutor to withdraw the case. If there is an issue which is raised by a defense counsel and fail, it should be brought out in the notice of the court by public prosecutor to ensure that justice is done. The commission of a criminal act is commonly regarded as an offence against the state which to be dealt with by the criminal justice machinery of the state executive. Therefore, on thorough consideration of the above material, it is crystal clear that it is not the duty of public prosecutors to quest conviction at all cost, nor is their duty to act as an avenging angle for the victim. On the contrary, their fundamental duty is to ensure that justice is delivered, and in pursuance of this, they should lay before the court all relevant evidence, including the evidence that favors the accused. The public prosecutor has an ethical obligation to balance the interests of the victims, the accused, and the society. India and its neighborhood relations, effect of policies and politics of developed and developing countries on India's interest, Indian diaspora. India must reset its Afghan policy. Engagement with Taliban is a reality which cannot be ignored. Comment. With the withdrawal of the United States from Afghanistan in process, Indian government has decided to ramp down its civilian presence in the war-torn country, bracing for a full-blown civil war. India has temporarily closed its consulate in Kandahar and evacuated its diplomats and Indo-Tibetan border police personnel stationed there. This follows the decision to suspend operations in the Indian consulates in Jalalabad and Herat. As a result, India today is left with its embassy in Kabul and consulate in Mazar-e-Sharif. India's traditional position with Taliban. For decades, New Delhi refused to engage with the Taliban. India was among the countries that had refused to recognize the Taliban regime of 1996 to 2001. India watched Taliban's growth with concern, assessing early that it was being driven by Pakistan's army and the ISI. The group's dependence on Pakistan, its religious extremism, and support for transnational jihadists, including Kashmiri centric outfits, are the core reasons for India remaining distant. The Kandahar hijack of the Indian Airlines flight of IC 814 forced India to negotiate. At other times, it supported anti Taliban forces in Afghanistan. Throughout the 1990s, India gave military and financial assistance to the Northern Alliance fighting the Pakistan sponsored Taliban regime in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the 9/11 attacks and the US crackdown leading to the fall of the Taliban regime took place. When the Taliban re emerged in 2006 2007 to once again challenge US forces, India maintained it was not going to talk with the Taliban. There are a host of concerns for India in Afghanistan. USA's diminishing role. A period of adjustment has become essential following a former US President unilateral announcement that US is pulling its troops out of the conflict-ridden country. Another development was the framework deal between the US and Afghan Taliban after 6 days of discussion at the Doha. The Afghan war has already become the longest war in US history. With the passage of time, the conflict has not only become more intense, it has also become more complicated. Control of Afghan government. The Afghan government controls barely half of the country. The 1/6 under Taliban control and rest contested. Most significant is the ongoing depletion in the Afghan security forces because of casualties, desertions, and a growing reluctance to join. Afghanistan launched the Kabul process for peace and security cooperation and also made an unconditional dialogue offer to the Taliban. The Taliban rejected his overture, declaring that they were ready to engage in direct talks only with the Americans. Further, India's outreach to the Taliban could expedite Kabul's fall and complicate India's relations with the existing allies. Increasing Taliban attacks. Recently, there has been a spike in violence with the Taliban carrying out a set of coordinated assaults around Afghanistan, rejecting an offer of a 3-month ceasefire by President of Afghanistan and laying a siege to Ghazni city. The violence this year has also put 2018 on course to the deadliest year of Afghan civilians with an average of 9 people killed every day according to UN data. Pakistan factor. The major challenge is the cooperation of regional players. Peace in Afghanistan and the wider region can only be achieved through multilateral mechanism involving the United States as well as major regional players, including Pakistan, Russia, Iran, China, India, and Saudi Arabia. Despite 6 months of concerted American punitive actions on Islamabad, the Pakistan establishment is not shutting down support for the Taliban's fighters. The role of Pakistan is going to expand significantly with the US depending upon it to implement the interim deal. This will be a diplomatic victory for Pakistan. What's the Iran factor? US administration's collision course with Iran is another hurdle to realizing its South Asia policy. Iran is a neighbor to both Afghanistan and Pakistan, and any section against Tehran will have consequences on the region. US is also against Iran, which is important to give access to the sea to the landlocked Afghanistan through Chabahar port, which is in India's interest, etc. Indian interest would be hurt. There is no guarantee that it will prevent the use of Afghan soil by anti India militants, but it has certainly expressed unwillingness to support such elements. Careful about not being caught between an India Pakistan crossfire, the Taliban wants to distance itself from the Kashmir imbroglio. The outreach in Goha then has instilled cautious optimism among Indian officials that the Taliban may not openly be hostile and may even seek stronger ties in the medium term. Why India should engage with Taliban? The Taliban acknowledges India's constructive role in Afghanistan and would not want a reduction in its diplomatic presence. India's absence in the Taliban's calculus would make it even more expendable if the Islamic Republic collapses. India's support for Kabul and consolidation of relations with power brokers such as Marshal Dostum, Mohammad Mohik, Ustad Atta, Ahmed Masood, Ismail Khan, Abdul Rasul Saif, Hamid Karzai, and others reduces the risk of dislocating its relationship with existing allies. If India seeks a politically inclusive Afghanistan and builds relations with all ethnic communities, then its outreach to Taliban requires openness. India's outreach to Taliban might complicate Pakistan's relations with Taliban once the latter comes to the power and faces the pressure of governance and administration. India's Afghan policy is at major crossroads to safeguard its civilian assets there as well as to stay relevant in the unfolding great game in and around Afghanistan. India must fundamentally reset its Afghanistan policy. India India must, in its own national interest, begin open talks with the Taliban before it is too late. The time for hesitant, half embarrassed backchannel parleys is over. Author suggested that it is time to openly talk to the Taliban. However, it does not mean according to recognition to the Taliban. It is only one of the parties in Afghanistan. It is neither Afghan government nor a part of it, not it. But with over a third of Afghanistan's more than 400 districts under Taliban control, the talk to the Taliban option is indeed the best of the many less than perfect options available to India. If India is not proactive in Afghanistan, at least now, late as it is, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, and China will emerge as the shapers of Afghanistan's political and geopolitical destiny, which for sure will be detrimental to Indian interests. Now, what's the way forward? Open dialogue with the Taliban should no longer be a taboo. It is strategic necessity, therefore, our outreach must now be direct and unambiguous. Perhaps most importantly, opening up the congested northwestern frontier is key to bringing India's continental grand strategy on an even keel, a process India has already started. Back-channel talks with Pakistan and a conquest ceasefire on the line of control, political dialogue with the mainstream Kashmiri leadership, secret parleys with Taliban all indicate that India is opening up its congested northwestern frontier. Proactive agreement of the Taliban will provide this effort with more strategic heft. Let's conclude it. Defeatism, or a lack of ambition for the India-Afghanistan relationship at this juncture would be much more detrimental to India's interest than anything the Taliban's return to Afghanistan's political center stage can do. India needs to reassess its policy choices in close coordination with Russia and Iran, constantly reminding them that complete surrender to the Taliban's demands will be detrimental to their own security. Challenges to the internal security through communication networks, role of media and social networking sites in internal security challenges, basics of cybersecurity, money laundering, and its prevention. The evolving threats of money laundering supported by the emerging technologies need to be addressed with equally advanced anti money laundering mechanisms elucidate. So, money laundering is the process of creating the appearance that large amounts of money obtained from criminal activity, such as drug trafficking or terrorist activity, originated from a legitimate source. The money from the illicit activity is considered dirty, and the process launders the money to make it look clean. The term money laundering originated from the mafia group in the United States of America. Mafia groups have made huge amounts of extortion, gambling, and this money is shown as legal money. In India, money laundering is popularly known as Hawala transactions. So, evolving threats of money laundering, criminals open online accounts with digital currency exchanges which accept fiat currency from traditional bank accounts. Then they start a cleansing process, mixing and layering, that is moving money into a cryptocurrency system by using mixers, tumblers, and chain hopping, also called cross currency. Money is moved from one cryptocurrency into another across digital currency exchanges. The less regulated, the better to create a money trail that is almost impossible to track. According to the Cryptocurrency Anti Money Laundering report, criminals also use theft and gambling to launder cryptocurrencies. Since it doesn't have regulatory authority, it is easy to trade between countries and can use money laundering in disguise of trading. Cryptocurrency is highly encrypted and cannot be traced easily. Creation of dark web or dark market which cause to exploit users through hacking, increasing proliferation of new non-cash payment methods such as prepaid cards, internet payments and mobile payments has opened up new gateways for money launderers. The rapid speed of transactions coupled with minimal face-to-face interaction between the person initiating the transaction and the service provider makes these new payment modes vulnerable to money laundering activities. Money launderers are also taking advantage of the increased need for financial transactions or institutions to identify and onboard their customers online. Trade based money laundering takes advantage of trade systems complexity, mostly in international contexts where the involvement of multiple parties and jurisdictions makes CDD processes and AML checks more challenging. Efforts of Government of India to address money laundering. Statutory framework in India before the enactment of Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002, the major statutes that incorporated measures to address the problem of money laundering were PMLA Act. It prescribes obligation of banking companies, financial institutions and intermediaries for verification and maintenance of records of the identity of all its clients and also of all transactions and for furnishing information of such transactions in prescribed form to the Financial Intelligence Unit India. It empowers the director of FIU and to impose fine on banking company, financial institutions or intermediary if they are or any of its officers fails to comply with the provisions of the Act as indicated above. PMLA envisages setting up of an adjudicating authority to exercise jurisdiction, power, and authority conferred by it as essentially to confirm attachment or confiscation of attached properties. The Black Money, Undisclosed Foreign Income and Assets, and Imposition of Tax Act 2015 to deal with the menace of the black money existing in the form of undisclosed foreign income and assets by setting out the procedure for dealing with such income and assets. Benami Transactions Amendment Bill 2015, it aims to expand the definition of Benami transactions and specifies the penalty to be imposed on a person entering into a Benami transaction. Institutional framework. Enforcement Directorate PMLA empowers certain officers of the Directorate of Enforcement to carry out investigations in cases involving offense of money laundering and also to attach the property involved in money laundering. Financial Intelligence Unit. It was established in India in 2004 as the central national agency responsible for receiving, processing, analyzing, and disseminating information relating to suspect financial transactions. FIU IND also is also responsible for coordinating and strengthening efforts of national and international intelligence, investigation, and enforcement agencies in pursuing the global efforts against money laundering and related crimes. FIU IND is an independent body reporting directly to the Economic Intelligence Council headed by the Finance Minister. Now, what's the way forward? Bringing KYC norms into cryptocurrency, bringing Japan model where they are provided with licenses and can be easily traceable. Adhering to FATF guidelines regarding cryptocurrency, need to expand capabilities on ways to probe virtual assets and regulate virtual asset providers to prevent money laundering. A multi-agency or multidisciplinary agency to work with the public and private partnership is key, tackling criminal finances, strengthening information exchange to dismantle networks, enforcing new technologies in criminal finance networks, enacting data protection laws, hiring white caps, and enabling web audits of money transfer by banks, Financial Stability Board, a global watchdog that runs financial regulation for G20 economies for regulating digital currencies. United Kingdom, it's legal to operate currencies but have to register with Financial Conduct Authority and also assure the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism standards. South Korea, here it's not a legal tender but use of synonymous bank accounts for virtual coin trading is prohibited. Now, what's the conclusion? Evolving threats of money laundering supported by the emerging technologies need to be addressed with equally advanced anti-money laundering mechanisms like big data and artificial intelligence. Both international and domestic stakeholders need to come together by strengthening data sharing mechanisms amongst them to effectively eliminate the problem of money laundering. Science and technology developments and their applications and effects in everyday life. What bearing will automation have on the existing work scenario? What steps need to be taken to cope with the changeover of workforce to automation? Explain. So India is in the midst of massive job crisis and that we all know. The unemployment rate has reached about 45-year high and it's about 6.1% in 2017-2018 as per leaked data from the Periodic Labor Force Survey report of the National Sample Survey Office. According to the PLFS report, the unemployment problem is especially aggravated in India's cities and towns. Aside from unemployment, there is employability crisis too in India, as per a recent released ILO report. Indian businesses rank fifth among 12 Asia Pacific nations for risk of automation and ninth for level of preparedness. A study by Deloitte and global software firm Autodesk showed. Countries with high or a potential for automation, Africa, you have Kenya and Morocco. In Europe, it's Czech Republic and Turkey. Asia, Japan and India. North America, Mexico and Costa Rica. And then you have South America, Peru and Colombia. So the increasing automation is threatening the jobs. Uh, According to the International Labour Organization, 60% of the formal employment in India relies on middle skilled jobs, including clerical, scales, service, skilled, agricultural, and trade related work, all of which are prone to automation. For instance, in the case of India, 51.8% of activities can be automated. Japan and Thailand run the risk of 55% and 54% respectively of their activities being automated. Over 40% of activities can be automated across the world. Similarly, an American medical shoe tested IBM's AI technology Watson to analyze 1,000 cancer diagnoses. In 99% of the cases, Watson was able to recommend treatment plans that match the suggestion of well-renowned oncologists. As the world gets more competitive, as manufacturing gets more competitive, it will use more automation, robotics, technology. New technologies like AI and robotics improve the functional efficiency drastically than manual methods. Thus, large industries will increasingly shift towards the automation in the quest of higher productivity. Automation threatens to impact women more than men, suggests the report. It points out that women are a large component of the workforce in retail, business processing, outsourcing, and textiles, clothing, footwear. This is primarily because automation threatens sectors where women form a major part of the workforce. Information technology, IT enabled services, and security services, followed by banking, will be the first sectors to feel the heat, wherein manual transactions and processing jobs will become so huge numbers of service jobs. Jobs in these sectors will be made redundant as a few lines of code will be able to perform the same tasks efficiently and effectively, according to People Strong and HR solution firm. Measures to tackle the crisis, upskilling and reskilling as part of the present jobs to cater the need of the industries, incentivizing and encouraging automation in sectors where it is critically necessary, focusing on increasing the efficiency and efficacy of micro, small and medium scale industries. Government needs to be inept in creating new employment generating sectors and reform existing ones at a time when machines are systematically cutting down the workforce requirements in the principal labor generating triumvirate of manufacturing and services sectors. Need to bring structural changes in employment stagnated areas like textile, cotton industries to increase employment opportunities in these areas. Government needs to bring more and more workers under formal economy so that they enjoy benefits of social security provided by government and companies. The concept of smart work and demand for specific skills must be encouraged in universities to redesign higher education and training and the state to facilitate job market transition. Futuristic ideas such as livelihood insurance and universal basic income presuppose state capacity to tax and distribute the additional income generated should be pondered upon. Automation has economy wide implications at the macro level and workplace level implications at the micro level for the worker. The fourth industrial revolution is in progress. India must reskill workers, rethink social policy, and examine the employment potential of new sectors such as care economy in the long run.